Okay, well, welcome back once again to the apartment building wealth generation system. This is module number 7. This is our last module for the online training program. And we have covered a lot of material, starting off with why apartment buildings are such a great investment, what do I buy, as well as where do I actually buy these types of properties. We then looked at the process of how do I buy it, understanding how to analyze a real deal, the steps to making an offer, and usually this is where a lot of education programs will stop, is at this point in time, and then leave you high and dry on your own. However, over my years of experience, I realize that there's much more to simply buying an investment property. Equally as important, if maybe not more so, is the actual managing of that property after you own that property. So module number 7 is talking about once you own this property, now what? The first year of transitioning as well as property management. So we ended up module 6 with a homework of making an offer. So if you actually have a potential deal on the go ahead and make the offer and feel comfortable knowing that you've got some escape clauses in there, such as your finance and inspection, legal, and etc. Also, if you don't have a deal, then work with an agent and do a mock-up offer. And even if you don't have a deal or an offer on the go, just simply sit with an agent, become familiar with the whole process, ask for some documentation, review it, get comfortable with it, ask your questions now so that when you do have the opportunity to take advantage of the paperwork in the acquisition of a property, you're all set and ready to go. All right, so in this last module, we're going to talk about the transition year as well as property management. So you don't know what you don't know. There's so much truth to that, and to discover the unknown and deal with it before it becomes a problem is it's such an opportunity to be able to have that unfair advantage of know what's potentially coming and being ready for it. So to understand that things are usually not what you expect them to be, and to understand that you need to quickly identify what needs to be done and then put a plan in place to make it what you want it to be. Be in control. So between the time that the conditions are fulfilled and the actual time when the title is switched over into your name, so you become the full legal owner, you could have 2 weeks, you could have 2 months, any amount of time. It all depends on the structure of the deal that you've put in place. This time is an important time for you because you can start to prepare for this transition. What I like to do is send out a letter of introduction to all my tenants. So you can't send it out until you actually own the property, but you can get it prepared. So for example, if you're closing on the 3rd of the month, what you want to do is inform the tenants of the sale and that rent payment should remain as is, but effective the next month should be made payable to yourself. Limit the information and any changes. Just ease their minds for now, because to think they don't know what's going on, you're only fooling yourself. There's a lot of gossip that goes around in these types of buildings, and you want to be in charge of this. Reassure them that there will be no major shakeup. People do not like change, especially elderly people. So assure them that things are going to be a nice, smooth transition. Let them know they can expect a more detailed letter of introduction early next month and that you plan to visit each tenant personally. Prepare the transfer of utilities and services. This is something that is easily overlooked. Some lawyers will take care of these things, such as contacting all the utility companies, informing them that as of a certain date, the property is now in control of yourself, and provide them with the information to send the bills to you from that point on. However, I wouldn't trust the lawyer to do this. Not that they're not capable of it, but not all lawyers will do it. So create a letter of introduction, send it to all of the utility providers, get all of your accounts set up ahead of time so that you're all set and ready to go. Make sure your finances in order. I always like to say that on closing, The only surprise is when there are no surprises. And I don't think there's ever been any two deals that have been the same. So often what will happen is you'll end up needing more cash at closing than what they anticipated. They can't tell you exactly what's going to be required until the actual day of closing. So several days ahead of time, they'll, for example, say, yeah, you're going to need approximately $48,789. So you go to the bank, get a certified check or money order for that amount, thinking that's all you need. Well, I don't know how many times it's happened to me, but more often than not, they'll say, oh, we're short, we're going to need $49,222 instead. Well, that's just a real pain in the butt because they always want it to be certified. So you can't just always run to the bank. Sometimes, like for myself, we do virtual banking, so it's not easy to get these money drafts. So what I do is I create a certified check for more than what they ask. Not a whole lot more, but just a little bit of a buffer. I give that to the lawyer so that they have money in case they need more. And then what happens is within a day or two after closing, they will refund me the difference back to me. Last month's rent deposits will help reduce the amount of cash required at closing, but you need to keep in mind that, again, it depends on the province or the state that you reside in or that the property is being purchased in, but I would be willing to bet money that every jurisdiction will require you to keep the last month's rent deposits in a separate trust account. Now, do I keep mine in a trust account? No, but we do keep it separate and we do have access to it 24/7. Unfortunately, what I've seen is a lot of investors will take the money on closing, apply that towards their down payment so they need less cash, and then they don't have that money sitting in a bank account to be used for their tenants' last month's deposits. So legally, technically, that's not allowed. You should not be doing that, but that's your call. Create the separate account, trust account for your last month's rent, and then you also have to pay interest to the tenant as mandated by the province or the state. So, for example, it used to be here in Ontario, which is one of the worst provinces or states in North America to be a landlord in, we were only allowed to increase our rents by 1.5%, depending on the year, yet we had to pay out 4 and 5% interest to our tenants. That has recently changed, so it's more in line with the rate that we are able to increase the rents by. But the bottom line is you still have to pay the tenant on an annual basis. What we like to do is compensate the tenant at the beginning of the year, like in December, so that they can use that little bit of money for Christmas gifts. The other option is because the last month's rent deposit doesn't keep up with the rental increases. If the tenant's been there for 5 or 6 years, their last month rent deposit is equal to their first month or their first year. So what you can do is you can add the interest portion, the growth, to that last month's rent deposit so it stays current. Now, after you have ownership, you now own the property, title is in your name. The thing is, you get to see what it actually is and decide what you want it to be. So you take a look at the physical condition and determine what exactly needs to be done. So you're taking a look at the big improvements, the capital cost improvements, such as your roof, your windows, the doors, the furnaces, etc., versus the maintenance issues, which are the smaller components, taps, toilets, carpet, painting, etc. Then create a plan for repairs. I've got a Gantt chart written in here, which I'll get into a little bit. Create a logical sequential steps to completing a good series or all of these tasks. This is good for capital and maintenance scheduling. So this is an actual picture of a Gantt chart. This is included in the program as well, so you can download this and play with this. It's simply created in an Excel spreadsheet, but what it does is it identifies who is doing what, when they're doing it, and how long it's scheduled to be done. And for example, when we take a look in that first section of the Gantt chart, from May 2nd to 3rd, Terrence is doing exterior cleanup. Well, S&C, I'm not sure who S&C is, but who S&C is going to be doing painting of the exterior. They can't start painting until the 4th after Terrence is done with the cleanup. Same thing, Terrence can't start deck repairs until the outside has been cleaned up as well. So it creates a logical system and a timeline for things to be done. So it also creates clarity as to who's doing what, when they're doing it, and by what time. Building relationships with your tenants. This is critical. You have to keep in mind that your tenants Your tenants are critical to the success of your business, and the ownership of this investment property, although it's giving you financial freedom for your future, it is still a business that needs to be treated and run like a business. So what you want to do is build a very good, strong relationship with your tenants. So when you provide a second letter of introduction giving tenant notice of the unit inspections for the purpose of meeting the tenants and identifying outstanding maintenance issues, this will be the tenant's opportunity to have a lot of little things that around the apartment that need to be fixed or cleaned up or repaired, whatever the case may be, to have them identified and done because the previous landlord wasn't doing it. When you show up with this letter to build this relationship, you're building trust, you're building a relationship. Come with a gift. You know, it doesn't have to be a whole box of donuts, but it could be a coffee and a couple of donuts. And again, it depends on the nature of your clientele in your building. For example, the most recent building I purchased was a seniors building. So seniors love to have a coffee and a donut. They love their sweets. If it was a building with young families, if there was kids involved, I might bring some juice boxes as well. So you need to assess who you're going to see and bring something that's suitable. This is an opportunity for you to explain your position, who you are, what changes you expect to take place over the course of the operation of this property. So this is your opportunity to provide a letter with rules and expectations. And explain them in person. Go through them with them one-on-one. This way they can't misinterpret them and they don't feel like you're coming in like a dictatorship. Be gentle and respectful with them. And you also have to keep in mind that you can't change an existing lease. So if they've signed an existing lease and it's got certain terms and conditions in it, then you have to honor that lease as well. And in many provinces and states, my understanding is that you are not able to alter any lease, even if it's a brand new one. In other words, you can't put in a set of rules that contradict some of the rules within the existing lease. So you need to be aware of what you can and cannot do in the area that you are investing in. Tenants love to have little things fixed, as I mentioned before, so identify the issues and fix them ASAP. Make them feel recognized and significant. This is huge. People, in more cases than not, people simply want to feel like they're being heard. If people call in and request to have their leaking tap fixed and they have to call 5 times and it's 6 months later, they're going to feel very discouraged, unwanted, and they're going to start looking for a better place to live. So you want to make sure you take care of these small issues because these small issues can have a significant impact on the success of your business. As you identify these issues, you will mention to them that you're taking over a 24-unit building, for example. There's potentially a lot of issues to be dealt with, and you will deal with all of the issues eventually, but you're going to do them in a specific order. You're obviously going to look at any items that need to be repaired with regard to safety first and foremost, then cost savings second, and convenience third. So safety first could be an open electrical box that a child could stick their fingers in. It's not working and somebody's tried to fix it and whatever. that would be a safety issue. So you want to get that fixed ASAP. Cost savings could be a simple little thing as dripping taps in the bathtub or the kitchen sink. That's also a convenience, but that's a cost savings to you because you're paying the water and sewer. And then convenience would be, well, my carpet is tired, my room needs a new light fixture, I'd like to have my unit painted, whatever the case. So that is more of a convenience. Focus on cleaning and maintaining or upgrading the common areas first. There's nothing that impacts a person more so than when they come to a property and they get that wow factor as soon as they step onto the property. So bring a little bit of color and decoration into the common areas as well. And what this does, when tenants start to feel good about the building they live in, they start taking care of the units they live in better as well. Transitioning out the bad tenants. So what you want to do is, during your due diligence, you may have identified a few bad tenants. Further, when you start to do your inspections, you identify the bad tenants. And what you want to do is get these individuals out. They're like a cancer in the building. So if you don't take care of that and be aggressive with it, you can potentially lose other good tenants as a result. So you need to, when you're talking to tenants, ask about issues with other tenants. Sometimes they're a little bit reluctant because they're afraid of potential negative feedback, etc. But you want to really get on top of this and manage it quickly, because your good tenants are going to really respect you for this, and you're going to be the golden child, I guess, in their eyes. But you also have to make sure they understand that it's just not as simple as going to the tenant and saying you have to leave. You have to have proper grounds for them to leave. You have to go through the proper process according to the jurisdiction that you're living in as well. So your good tenants need to understand this, but as long as they see you working towards that, then they are more likely going to work with you as well. I do have a picture of a Hell's Angel symbol on there because that was an actual case for myself. And one of the properties we took over, we did have a Hell's Angel tenant, and he wasn't a bad guy, but you could tell that he was a bad guy, if you know what I mean. He's the type of individual, I jokingly say this, but I'm very serious at the same time. If I had a gun and he was coming at me and I shot him, once or twice, he's still going to come and beat the daylights out of me. He just has that blank, vacant look in his eyes sometimes, that crazed look. Yet, when I first met him, I treated him with respect. I didn't judge him based upon the fact that he belonged to Hell's Angels. I won't say we became friends, because you should never become friends with any of your tenants, but we became friendly. And I treated him with respect, and he treated me with respect as well. I explained to him how the rules worked and how they had to work in order for the building to operate, and he agreed. And he actually stayed with us for about a year before he was forced to move out because he was no longer able to pay his rent. But because I treated him with respect, I was able to receive respect back, and we had a good relationship. So you now better understand some of the many little and not so little things that can happen in the first year. You know now that what needs to happen to avoid the electricity from being disconnected. That actually happened for us in one of our properties where we failed to make the switch with the electrical provider. Our lawyer didn't make the switch, so the electrical provider had no idea who was owning the building anymore, and they kept sending the electric bill to the property itself, where there were 24 tenants, but nobody picks the mail up from the, there was no one mailbox for the entire property. So all of these bills were just sitting at the post office, not being paid until the power got turned off one day, and we jumped into action. So you now know how to connect with tenants quickly to make them happy, so you can decrease vacancy, increase rents, and ultimately the revenue. So not only do you know how to connect, you know why you need to connect. Now, with respect to property management, the purpose here is to better understand the role of a property manager and what you should expect from a good property manager, and also to understand the value of a good property management company and how it can actually increase the value of a property. I always suggest that to my students, if you have the opportunity to property manage your own property, even if that's not your goal or desire, I still suggest you do it for at least 6 months so you get a taste of what the property manager actually has to do and go through. It's always easy to judge other people. Although we shouldn't judge other people, we tend to. But if you can walk in the other person's shoes, your judgment is going to be very different. So we're going to take a look at the 3 P's of property management. That's managing the expenses, processes to make things run smoothly and professionally, and then people, how to attract and keep good tenants. So with respect to the property, I mentioned earlier about doing inspections when you take the property over. This is something that you should be doing on an annual basis. Every year you should be inspecting the property, so that's including the exterior and interior. You take a look at the building itself, the roof, the gutters, the fascia, the trim, the walkway, the parking, the stairs, the emergency. You assess everything about the building, and you take notes and you build a list. Then you actually go unit by unit. You take a look around the unit for any potential safety hazards, which could include electrical, tripping hazards, sharp objects, etc. And again, if you're dealing with elderly people, you're looking for little things that could be a tripping hazard because these people are not the steadiest on their feet. You're also looking to reduce liability. You want to make sure that your tenants all have proper tenant insurance. Tenant insurance is not very expensive. It's about $250 a year. And what this does is it protects the tenants in the event of a fire or damage to the unit where they lose their contents. So their contents are protected. But it also provides them with a certain amount of liability insurance. So if they have friends come over and they trip over the edge of the carpet, fall, and break a limb, then if their guest is going to sue anybody, it should be the tenant themselves, so the tenant will have insurance. And if the tenant doesn't have insurance, then they're going to try and sue you, the landlord, even though you had nothing to do with it. So you always need to be on the lookout for potential safety hazards, tripping hazards, liability hazards, both in the tenant's units and in your own property as well. Then you're going to be focusing on saving dollars. So you're looking for an opportunity to repair and replace things. Water is probably one of the biggest money wasting expenses there is. Dripping taps is just dollars flowing down the drain. Running toilets are an even bigger drain. I actually had a tenant with a running toilet. The toilet tank was overflowing and going down the drain pipe and constantly running. And it took us 3 months to discover this. And it was because the local city called us and said, your water bill appears to be way out of whack. Is there something wrong with your building? So I called the tenants in that building and everybody said, no, everything's fine. So I actually drove to the property and inspected each unit. And I discovered this running toilet, and I asked, why wouldn't you have told us this? And he said, well, it's not bothering me. Well, the cost for that, those 3 months for the water bill for his running toilet was over $500. Could have easily replaced the entire toilet by having a plumber come in and still save money. So you need to be aware of these little things. And here's a little tip for you, especially with toilets. This is a little tip that we share occasionally, and it's in the program that my wife has created as well. But you take food coloring. When you're doing the inspection of the unit, the first thing you do is you go to the bathroom, lift the back of the toilet cover off, take a couple drops of food coloring and drop it into the tank, then put the lid back on and go about the rest of the inspection. when you're finished the inspection, go back to the toilet, lift the toilet lid, and if there's any of that colored water dye in the toilet bowl, then you know you've got a water leak. Sometimes the water leaks can be so slow they're not obvious, and this little food coloring trick can identify those expensive drips. Also, broken shower tiles, broken windows. You want to make sure, like shower tiles, for example, you want to make sure the water doesn't get in behind, soaking the walls rather, and getting in behind the tubs. Same thing with your dripping taps in the kitchen. You want to make sure that it's one thing for the water to drip in the sink and go down the drain, but if it's dripping on the counter or underneath the counter, it can cause a lot of damage to the counters as well. Then you're going to take a look for the comfort, the functionality of the kitchen, the cupboards. Is everything working properly? The countertop, are the appliances in good condition? The bathroom in good condition? Is the ceiling fan working well? These are all things that you want to identify and then address on a regular basis. This should be done a minimum of once a year. And this is a great opportunity for you not only to stay on top of the condition of your property, which will help save money and improve the quality, but it will also help deter illegal activity from taking place inside your unit. For example, if they know, the tenant knows that you're going to be doing regular inspections on the property, then they're less likely to be growing pot, marijuana, or any other sort of illegal activity in there as well. With respect to the property, being proactive on the maintenance, so that small drip can cost thousands. The torn carpet can be ruined by a pet or child. It can be a tripping hazard. Worn shingles can allow water damage inside. Aging hot water tanks should be addressed on a regular basis as well. So anytime you see a little bit of rust starting to take place, get on top of that. The picture in the bottom right here, you can see that there is no tray. Sometimes it depends where the hot water tank is located. You want to make sure that if and when the tank has a leak, you're able to contain it. Therefore, you can minimize the amount of damage that it causes. This can be done with a tray around the tank itself. It can also be achieved by having a floor drain close by. The picture in the bottom left is a pretty disgusting looking picture, but this is something that it can happen, and you may or may not be able to get insurance for this. Either way, it's a disgusting thing to have happen in your building, and it's something that can very easily be prevented by simply putting and installing a sewer check valve. So you always want to make sure that your property has that sewer check valve. Managing the workers on your property. So you need to be aware that any worker that comes onto your property, you are liable for. So if they fall, trip, get hurt, whatever, you are potentially liable for their safety. You want to make sure they have their own insurance. So here in Ontario, it's called the Workers' Compensation Board. Whenever we have a worker come onto our site, we always make sure that they have their own insurance coverage. Therefore, we don't have to worry about it. With our handyman, he doesn't make enough money to have his own insurance coverage. So what we do is we will put him under our own insurance coverage so that he is covered if and when something were ever to happen to him. The challenge with your properties is that you're too small for full-time, yet you still need good quality workers, and the problem with part-time is that you have a higher turnover, and if they are good, they're going to be so busy you can't get hold of them. So you want to make sure that they're qualified and capable of doing whatever the task is. So you don't want somebody saying, oh yeah, I've done lots of plumbing, and then do what you see here on the bottom right where you have no P-trap. So you're going to have all kinds of sewer gas coming back up into through the sink. So make sure you are managing the workers all the time. Managing the expenses is a big one as well. So a good property management company will make sure that the expenses are staying in check. If they start to see, for example, the water bill is too high. Actually, as I'm recording this right now, I received a call on a property that we managed, and the municipality is overlooking at the water service there because the water bill has been so high and they can't find where the water leak is. This was noticed when as the property management company, we noticed the bill was higher than normal. So that's what a good property management company does. It stays on top of these types of expenses and gets them rectified as quickly as possible. So remember the formula that value equals your net operating income divided by your cap rate. The cap rate remains pretty constant, but that net operating income can be increased through revenue, decreased through expenses, which is going to ultimately increase your value. And a good property management company can do this. So if the property management company can either save or create $2,000 extra for your business, then that's going to increase the value of the building by over $28,000. Going up to $5,000, all of a sudden it jumps up to $71,000. So a good management company can really add a lot of value to your property. Now, just a little side note here. This is based upon a lesson that I learned through a good friend of mine who started off with his investing career early and had a handful of properties, about 6 properties, while he was still working full time. And he gave the property management company full control of the properties. In other words, manage the expenses, pay the bills, collect the rents, do it all. And all of a sudden, he got some phone calls from some of the electricity provider and the gas provider saying, "Why aren't you paying your bills?" Turns out the property management company skipped town after not paying the bills for about 2 or 3 months and collecting the rents on the first of the month. They skipped town, leaving my friend sort of high and dry because he still owed the natural gas, he still owed the electric bills, plus he still owed the mortgages that hadn't been paid for 3 months as well. So that could have easily put him bankrupt as a result of that. So you always want to make sure you stay on top of the bill payments. What I would suggest you do is you allow somebody to manage your building, but you pay your own bills. So what we do with our property management company for other people is we will collect the rents and we will deposit the rents directly into the landlord's bank account. This gives the landlord enough money in their account to pay their utility bills, the property taxes, etc. That responsibility does not fall on us, the property management company. That gives the owner, the landlord, peace of mind knowing that the bills are being paid. We then invoice the landlord for our services and the landlord pays us a check as well. So it prevents us from having to have multiple accounts for each of our landlords, but more importantly, it allows the landlord to remain in control of their expenses so they know for a fact that everything's being paid and being paid on time. How much do you pay for property management? Well, this can be all over the map. It can be anywhere from 4 to 12% of the gross rents or the net rents. You can be experiencing fill rates of 25, 50, 100%, which is of 1 month rent or a flat fee. So what a fill rate is, or a fill fee is, for example, if the monthly rent is $1,000 for a unit and you've agreed to pay a 50% fill fee, you're paying your 4 to 12% monthly fee, but on top of that, you're going to pay 50% of 1 month's rent in order to get a tenant placed in there. Now, you would think that that would be included in the 4 to 12%, but I can honestly tell you, being a property manager and having run a property management company for as many years as I have now, there's not a whole lot of money to be made in the property management business. That initial fee of 4 to 12% barely covers the costs of managing the property. So if you have to spend 10 trips going to a unit and the unit's on the other side of the city, or it's a half hour, an hour drive away, that's time you're not being paid for. So the 50% of 1 month rent is a compensation for that. And you want to make sure that you compensate your property manager well, and you want to make sure you compensate them better than any of their other clients so that you get the preferential treatment as well. They could also be charging you a markup. So for example, you've got a plumbing issue. The plumber has to come in and spend a couple hours. Well, the property manager has to go over, and depending on the tenant and whether it's a vacant unit or not, occupied, the property manager may have to spend time there with the plumber as well. So in some cases, what the property management companies will do is they'll take and add 5% or 10% on top of that bill for compensation for their time and getting that work done as well. You want to maintain control of your money, so watch for double billing and extra markup, especially if you are a long distance landlord. You really want to stay on top of the paperwork. I've heard of cases, it's not common, but there is potential for a property management company to bill you for work that isn't actually being done. So try and create a system where you can follow up. Perhaps you do some periodic checks and just show up at the property unannounced and see what's going on. Make sure all of the bills are being paid in a timely fashion. Make sure that your handyman and the small tradespeople are being paid quickly. Don't do a 30-day holdback. You want to be able to count on these people showing up in very short notice. So making them wait 30 days to be paid is not something they are accustomed to. They tend to live paycheck to paycheck. So if they have an opportunity to go to Joe Blow's building and get paid cash and be paid right away for a job, or go to your place and do the same job but have to wait 30 days, guess who's going to be serviced first? You also want to avoid the high cost of penalties, interest, collections, and also, it's not mentioned here, but your credit rating as well. You want to make sure you control those numbers and maintain your credit. All right, so let's talk about some processes. Processes is critical. So you want to have these processes in place ahead of time so that A, you look very professional, but B, you know what to do when the time comes that you need to do something. And this can we'll start with the notice to vacate. When somebody provides you with a notice to vacate, do you just simply accept it and then start to stew about having to fill a vacancy? Why not try and retain that tenant? Inform them of the extra costs for moving out. They're going to incur moving costs. They're going to have to cut off their services, get new services. That all takes money for those cancellation fees, etc. Just the inconvenience. So you find out that they're moving because you put the rent up by $40. Well, you explain to them it's going to cost you a lot more than the increase in rent to move, and you may not find a better place, etc. Well, what if we drop it down to $30? Well, yes, you're not getting the full $40, but now you don't have to go through the headaches, the hassles of finding a new tenant, paying for a fill fee, or having an empty unit for 2 or 3 months while you get a new tenant moved in there. Once you have vacancies, where are you going to advertise and how are you going to advertise? So there's one thing that a lot of people fail to do is actually put a sign in the window or at the property of the property that has the tenant that is vacant. So you want to make sure other people in the building know that there's going to be a vacancy coming up, because quite often other tenants will have friends or family that want to move in as well. People driving by will, love that building. I wish I could get in there, and all of a sudden, oh, there's an apartment for rent. So it's extremely cost effective. It doesn't cost you anything to throw the sign up on your property. Screen your tenants extremely well. Do not ever accept a tenant without pulling their credit report. You can hire the services of a company to pull the credit reports, or you can simply ask the applicant to provide a current credit report. Have them pull it themselves. I personally like doing that because of a couple things. You can tell the person that if you pull their credit report, it's going to have a negative impact on them. But most people don't care about that. Okay. You can then tell them that you should pull your credit report yourself so you can learn about your credit report and the importance of having good credit. And by doing it yourself, you'll be given a consumer-friendly copy of your credit report, which will explain what and how the credit works, and give you some tips on how you can improve your credit. So it's a good thing for them. It costs them $20 or $25 to get a copy online and be able to download it immediately. If they're not prepared to spend $25 on their credit report to apply for your property, how badly do you want them as a tenant? So it in and of itself is a little bit of a good screening technique that you can use as well. Always collect deposits once they are approved. Get those deposits immediately. When they sign the lease, get a co-signer as well if required, and as often as you can get them. Move-in inspection. This is a must-have in Alberta. Like you legally have to have it. It should be a must-have in every province and every state. You are doing a huge disservice to yourself if you do not have a move-in inspection. The reason being is a tenant moves in, you've got beautiful hardwood floors, and 6 months later they have ruined the floors, and there's gouges in the floors and whatnot. You take them to the tribunal, the tenant tribunal, making a claim against them for damages to your property. The adjudicator, the judge, is going to say, well, what condition were they beforehand? And you're going to say, well, they were perfect, they were brand new. And the tenant's going to say, no, they weren't. This is how they were when I moved in. Well, who's to say? You don't have any proof. So if you have a move-in inspection with pictures, or better yet, with video, then the tenant cannot contest your claim, and the judge or adjudicator will rule in your favor then. Non-payment of rent. How does that process work? Well, again, in every province, every state, it's going to be a little bit different. Here in the province of Ontario, where I live and invest, it's what we call an N4 and then an L1. There is a charge. It starts off with an N4. You give them the N4, which gives them 2 weeks to make good on their late payment. If they don't make good on their late payment, then you issue the L1. That costs you $175. That is going to force them to go to tribunal. Now, if they make good on their rent, then the N4 is simply ripped up. If they make good on the rent, they have to also pay you the $175 fee as well. If you wait 2 weeks, they say, well, my check is late, I'm going to be 2 weeks late with my rent, and you say, okay, no problem. You don't issue the N4, and then 2 weeks later, they still don't have the money, so then you issue the N4. You've lost 2 weeks. You want to issue that N4 on the day they are actually late, and you explain to them, I understand you've got the rent coming to me in a few days, that's great. When I get the rent, I rip up the N4, not a problem. You treat all tenants, new and old, young and old, all the same way, consistently and fairly. If they give you, this is a big reason why you don't put family in and you don't become friends with your tenants, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they start to take advantage of you. They'll come up with all kinds of excuses, but if you treat everybody consistently and fairly, then you remove those excuses. Because the reality is, we all have excuses at certain points in time, but we still have the mortgage that needs to be paid at the beginning of each month. And just because they failed to pay their rent, that mortgage needs to be paid. So you have to be tough, but be fair. Document history of late rents all the time, because this can be used to evict the tenant in the future if they've created a pattern. Now, if they consistently are late by a week every month, and you document it every month, but you never N4 them, you never try to evict them, then you basically have changed the due date for the rent to be a week late, because you have inadvertently agreed to accept their rent a week late by not taking action. So not only do you have to document, but you have to take action as well. Understand the paperwork. It's very detail-oriented, and depending on the adjudicator, the judge, and depending on the mood they're in that day, depending on the tenant, depending on you, they are a stickler for details. So if you start the eviction process on the wrong date and you miss it by 1 day, they won't simply say, oh, we have to add a day on here. They'll say, oh, it's wrong, you have to start over, and you've just lost a couple weeks. Annual unit building inspections. So we talked about this earlier, going through the units and looking and identifying all of the issues. You do a second annual inspection, and that's for your smoke detector agreements. Now, if you are an active investor right now and you don't have a smoke detector agreement in place, I think I've mentioned this earlier in the program already, then you need to get out of this program right now, get the smoke detector agreement in place, and have your tenants sign that. You need to do this annually minimum, but we actually suggest you do it twice a year. We do it around the time that the time changes. So we know that come spring or fall, when the time changes, that's the time for the smoke detector agreements. So by doing the smoke detector agreements twice a year and your annual inspection, you're now into that unit 3 times a year, which makes it very difficult for the criminals to partake in criminal activity. If you have complaints, document them. Have a log that you record all the calls, when the calls were made, who made them, what the actual complaint was all about, and what the response to that call was as well. Resolve them as quickly as possible, and sometimes this means swallowing your pride a little bit in order to make it work, but whatever the case, make it right. And do the right thing, be proactive. Follow up and make sure your tenants are happy. So if somebody consistently calls about a tenant and you take action, but it doesn't appear like you're taking action, then the tenant who made the complaint in the first place isn't going to be very happy because they don't see anything going on, because you can't quickly and easily evict a person unless it's for illegal activity or endangering the lives of other people in the building. Other than that, it takes time. It takes weeks, if not months, in order to evict a person. And in the meantime, the tenant who made the complaint can be looking and say, well, you're not doing anything, and they'll get angry and maybe they'll vacate instead. Do not ignore a complaint and risk losing your good tenants. People. Tenants are your customers. They are your bread and butter. They are the people who are paying the mortgage. They're buying the building for you. So treat them with respect, fairness, and consistency. Treat it like a business relationship, not friends, and document the heck out of everything. So you need to become very good at documenting and filing these reports. So this includes your leases, and contracts for service, the complaints, requests, everything. Have a system in place so that when somebody calls to make a complaint, you've got a place to document it, you've got a place to follow up with it as well. Understand and appreciate their situation. So you think that you're doing property management, and in reality, you're not doing property management, you're doing people management, because this is very much a people-oriented business, and there's a lot of psychology involved here, so you need to be sometimes you need to wear a psychologist hat in order to survive. It's also a very thankless job. Very rarely do we get a tenant calling us or contacting us and saying, you know what, I just wanted to reach out and say you're doing a great job. The only time they call us is to complain about something. So it can be a very draining job. You need to understand that and be empathetic with your property manager. Understand and appreciate their situation and attempt to always make it a win-win situation, and simply step into their shoes and see what their life is all about. You have no idea the life they're living, and don't be too quick to judge these people's lives, especially the lower income people. It may appear that they are lazy and not going to work and just living off the system, but you don't know their background, you don't know their full story. So I'm not saying give in to every whim they want, but at the very minimum, understand where they're coming from so that you can then create a win-win situation for them. Relate to them at their level. Don't be condescending. Don't be rude and arrogant. Understand your rights as a landlord versus the rights of a tenant. you'll have some tenants who think they know their rates much more than they actually do. And if you don't know what your own rates are and what their rates are, then you can be intimidated and run over by these people. And be willing to compromise. You don't have to be right all the time. Let them have the occasional win, or simply just compromise and say, well, what if we do this? Would that work for you? So as you can see, there's plenty to learn about property management, and you can see the importance of running your property like a business. Poorly managed properties cost the owner thousands of dollars in cash flow and property value. Poorly managed properties become a favorite target for the educated investor. You don't want to own a poorly managed property. You want to buy a poorly managed property. So one of the properties that I own, I call it my butt ugly building. This is a 21-unit apartment building. It's a perfect example of this. This was a building that over the years slowly slid into disrepair, and it's like a spiral. As the property becomes run down, it starts to attract run down tenants. The property manager can't win, so the property manager quits, and it just gets to the point that nothing's being done properly around the property. And we were able to buy this property for $225,000. That's a 21-unit apartment building, because it was so poorly mismanaged and taken care of. And it took a lot of our money to fix it back up as well, but it was well worth it in the long run. So those are the type of properties you are looking for to purchase, not looking for to manage. So happy hunting with that. Now, your homework for this as well is to find a listing, acquire as much information from the realtor as possible, run it through the analyzer based upon the numbers. Does this sound familiar? Well, it is familiar because it's practice, practice, practice. This is so critical to get used to that analyzer. I want you to know this analyzer inside and out, because it's going to become your best friend. And I just wanted to remind you again that every year we have a live workshop. It's not included in the investment that you made for the online training course. This is in addition to. However, it is very affordable. We hold this every fall in Ottawa, Ontario. And the reason that we hold it in Ottawa is because we go on a field trip where we actually go out and we take a look at some of my properties. I will walk you through some of my properties so you can see firsthand what it is I'm looking for or what it is I'm trying to avoid. I will show you the neighborhoods as well and why I bought in these neighborhoods. And subject to availability, we'll also look at other properties that are currently on the market and take a look at analyzing those. If we can get into them, we will. A little difficult to do when you have a busload of people though. You'll also have the opportunity to meet my power team. So the next live event I have coming up shortly, I have my lawyer is going to be there, and he'll be discussing whether you incorporate or not. He'll be discussing joint venture agreements, co-tenancy agreements, etc. I also have an insurance broker. My insurance broker is coming out, and a lot of people don't really consider them to be part of a very important part of their team. However, they are an extremely important part of your team, and to hear and understand what goes on in the insurance industry and what you need to do to mitigate your liability, for example, is extremely important. I also have a member of my team being the lender from First National. He comes from Toronto to Ottawa every year to do a presentation to the group as well. I will try and have my home building inspector available for the event as well. And we also share lots of stories from the students, their success stories as well. So it's a very small, intimate group. We only open it to 20 students on this annual basis, and you can also bring a guest as well. The reason why we have it at 20 plus guests is that the bus tour, we can only accommodate so many people on the bus. So again, as an online student, your investment is just $497, which includes a guest for free. You're also able to re-attend if you want to come back the next year or as many years as you want for just $197 investment, and you can bring a guest as well. If you want more information about this workshop, when the next workshop is, just email info@arcawealthacademy.com. And again, tech support is info@arcawealthacademy.com. If you ever need to contact myself, it's apartmentwealthgeneration@gmail.com. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you all of my insight and knowledge over these 7 modules. I suggest you keep an eye on your email, check back periodically, because we will be adding bonus modules, interviews as they take place, and documents as they become available as well. So this is going to be a program that continues to grow. You have access to it 24/7, and you can come back to it as often as you want. So with that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you at the top. Take care now.